Welcome to Election 2016, Where We Stand. I'm Tony Perkins, President of FRC Action, and I'm standing here in our headquarters in Washington, D.C. I think the words of the psalmist King David may have been on the minds of many Christians this morning. Weeping may endure for the night, but joy comes in the morning. Those words ring especially true this morning as news spreads that the nation has rejected a continuation of the anti-family, anti-faith policies of Barack Obama by electing Donald Trump in perhaps the most stunning political upset of the modern age. As we get started, let me encourage you to click on the share button below and share this information with your friends. The questions we want to address today is, what role did the evangelical vote play in this historic upset? The commander of the FRC Action Values Bus, Brent Kylan, is here with that answer. We'll also take a look at the numbers with Scott Rasmussen, founder and president of STIRK. We'll also get an overview of what the next Congress will look like, as we are joined by one of the many FRC Action-endorsed pro-family candidates that won last night, Congressman-elect Jim Banks of Indiana. There is also a story to tell from the states. Our state and local director, Kana Gonzalez, will have those details. And finally, what does this mean for America, this victory? The conservative movement, what does it mean for Christians going forward? FRC's Vice President of Government Affairs, David Christensen, is here with those answers. Well, first, let's start with the values bus that has been traveling across this country, and FRC Action's Executive Director, Brent Kylan, is here. Brent, come on in and join me. 17,000 miles traveling across the country. How many of the battleground states did FRC Action's Values Bus make it to?
We were in a number of them, Tony. We were in North Carolina, we're in Ohio, Iowa, we're in Missouri, Florida, Virginia, Colorado. Most of those were not only just battlegrounds in the presidential, most of them also had key U.S. Senate races on the ballot this year. So we were able to visit a good number of those.
Now, we're going to talk later about this with Scott Rasmussen, but the turnout of evangelicals set records. It was at about 27-28% of the voting population, and of those, 81% voted for Donald Trump. That's more than voted for Mitt Romney, that's more than voted for John McCain, and a higher percentage than voted for George W. Bush in 2004. So very significant. What were the issues, and I know you've spent almost 2 months on this bus going across the country. What were you hearing as you were driving into these small towns and cities all across America?
Well, it was awesome to be able to travel the country. We went from Washington, D.C. all the way to Washington State and back, and as you said, spent 60 days on the road, just getting a chance to talk to Americans, hear what their concerns are. There was a number, I would say, that kept recurring that were really big issues. First one was the Supreme Court. When you talked about the fact that the next president will appoint maybe as many as 4 Supreme Court justices, I'm telling you, that issue resonated with a lot of people.
Well, and there was a concise video that FRC Action put out dealing with the court, which was viewed by millions of people. And strategically, you used that and you targeted evangelicals who were kind of on the sidelines, because there was a big question going into this election. Mitt Romney had, in 2012, kind of had apathy among evangelical voters. This time, Donald Trump actually faced outright opposition. So you targeted those with the Supreme Court video, as well as one on the platform.
Yes, we did. We did. And with that Supreme Court video, we showed the cases that had been decided by a single vote and the huge impact those have on us. That other video, the platform video, also got over 1 million views on that, targeting that, again, to evangelicals. That message also really resonated with that. We were distributing platform comparisons on the bus tour as we pulled up to stops, and those were just flying off the shelf. Because people, I think, really realized this election, it wasn't just people or personalities on the ballot, it was issues.
And by the way, the exit polling, early exit polling, there's still more to come, and we're going to be doing some of our own exit polling analysis in the next 24 to 48 hours. But the top lines as this information is coming out is that the Supreme Court was the predominant issue when it came to not just evangelicals, but voters overall. they understand what's at stake in this election because of the makeup of the Supreme Court.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. And another issue that I think jives with that is the issue of religious liberty. We had the bus out in Washington State, had it signed, and in Oregon, signed by Barronelle Stutzman, the florist who is getting sued for declining to participate in a same-sex wedding. Our bus was signed by the Klein family. We had it in Iowa, another swing state, at a church that's in a lawsuit. The government is issued guidelines interpreting a public accommodations law saying you might have to open up your church bathrooms, women's bathrooms, to men who identify as women. And there's a lot of concerns over some of those religious liberty cases. And of course, the Supreme Court will play a huge role in that.
And speaking of bathrooms, gender confusion, you spent a lot of time in North Carolina going to all 100 counties. We're going to be talking with Kana Gonzalez a little bit later about those races. Right now, clearly Donald Trump won North Carolina as he won the presidency. That was a super battleground state, it was described. And right now, looks like the governor's race narrowly edged out Governor McCrory, but that's going to be contested, so we're going to talk more about that with Kana Gonzalez in a bit. So I know you're tired. You've been on the road for a couple of months, late night last night. Your assessment in terms of the underpolling, I'm going to get real numbers from Scott here, but did you see more out there than what the media was reporting in terms of support?
I would absolutely have to say I did. I would go to stops talking to people, and without me asking anything, I had so many people coming up and saying, I'm talking to people who haven't voted ever or haven't voted in decades. I'm registering people. And there was a huge sense of urgency. I would say almost everybody also said this might be the most important election I've ever seen. So there was definitely that group of people that was engaged, that was watching that just didn't seem to be showing up on the polls.
All right, Brent Kylan, great job as the Values Bus Commander.
Thank you,
traveling the country. 17,000 miles over the last 2 months as they traveled over 20 states. And by the way, I had a chance to spend a little bit of time on the bus with them, and it was great meeting the folks of North Carolina in particular. So gracious and hospitable at every stop, bringing out food and refreshments. I might just have to hit back, get on the road back there in North Carolina. All right, we're gonna take a look here for a moment at some of the congressional races that we were involved in. A number of those races where we saw significant success in electing not just Republicans, but conservative leaders. And one of those is Congressman-elect Jim Banks of Indiana, a longtime pro-family leader there in the state of Indiana, now coming to Congress to join the ranks of the real fighters who are going to fight for your family and the principles we care about. Jim, welcome this afternoon, and thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you, Tony. It's great to be with you.
And once again, congratulations on a hard-fought victory, and we're excited about you joining the ranks of the Freedom Caucus and the other fighters here in Washington, D.C. for the values that you have represented for so long and that we care so deeply about.
Well, thank you, first of all, to the role that Family Research Council, Action, and your PAC played in my election victory, both in the primary and yesterday. I'm very grateful to FRC for the work that you do, and I look forward to being a partner with you in Washington soon.
Jim, let me get your sense from last night's victory for Donald Trump. What message do you think is being sent by voters across the country, and in particular there in Indiana?
Well, from a perspective of Hoosiers, Tony, I couldn't be any more proud that Mike Pence is going to be the next Vice President of the United States of America. He's been a tremendous pro-life, conservative leader for our state as governor over the past 4 years, and America is in for a real treat with Vice President Mike Pence. And for me, that is fundamental to how I feel about Donald Trump as well. The president-elect showed tremendous leadership and judgment when he picked Mike to be his running mate. When it comes to choosing those Supreme Court nominees, having Mike Pence at his right hand to help advise him is so important to make sure that we get pro-life Supreme Court justices who will vote to overturn Roe v. Wade, protect our religious liberty, and fundamentally restore this country to what it can and should be. So I'm excited. Hoosiers overwhelmingly voted for Donald Trump and Mike Pence, as well as pro-life, pro-family leaders to take the helm as governor of the state of Indiana. We sent another pro-life United States senator to Washington starting in January, and Todd Young as well. I think what we've seen in Indiana is what we've seen all over the country. This is an exciting time for conservatives.
Jim, I want to get your sense, because you are going to be coming here to Washington at a very unique time in history. Very rarely do you come where you have a Republican president, a Republican-controlled Senate. We're going to talk about that. The Republicans retained control of the Senate. They've retained control of the House. This is a very unique time. What is at the top of your agenda and your priorities as you come to Washington?
Well, for me, Tony, what we've seen play out in Indiana, the battle over our religious liberty, which is so fundamental to what we are as a country and who we are as Americans, that battle is going to be waged in state houses all over the country and in our nation's capital. And I look forward to working with FRC and others as a strong proponent for the preservation of our religious liberty, our religious freedom in the years to come. So I believe that'll be a battle that will be fought, that I look forward to being a part of. But also, as the most recently deployed member of Congress, when I get there in January, having just deployed to Afghanistan last year, I look forward to working with President Trump and Republicans in the House and the Senate to restore the greatness of the United States military. I know that's fundamental and important to you as well. To confront the threats that we face around this world. The current administration, I believe, has done more to diminish the role and strength of our military than we've ever seen in American history. And having just been deployed to Afghanistan, I got to see that firsthand with my own eyes. And when I get to Washington, I look forward to being an advocate for a stronger, more mighty military to confront the threats that we face at home and abroad.
Well, Congressman-elect Jim Banks, again, congratulations, and thanks for joining us on this very important day.
Thank you, Tony.
All right, look forward to seeing you here in Washington, D.C.
Have a good day.
Folks, it's very significant, as I mentioned, for one of those few times in history where the Republicans will control Congress and the White House. And in fact, when you look at now the makeup of the Democratic Party, their bench is empty. With Hillary Clinton having basically stepped to the forefront. If you look, just take the two primaries. The Democratic primary, you had Bernie Sanders and basically Hillary Clinton. That was it. And Tim Kaine was supposed to be the heir apparent after her. But you look at the Republican side where you had 17 candidates in the primary. This could be, if the Republicans do it right and follow the lead of Donald Trump and actually do what they say they're going to do, this could be a Republican generation. Not just a Republican Congress. This could be significant, folks. We could see the clock turned back on all of the liberal, anti-faith, anti-family policies that has endangered America. But you're going to have to stay involved. You're going to have to be engaged. I want to encourage you, click the share button at the bottom of the screen. Let your friends see what's unfolding here in Washington, D.C. and what lies ahead. I'm going to turn now to the states and what's been happening at the states last night. Not just the national scene, but a lot happening at the state level. Kana Gonzalez, our state and local director here at the Family Research Council. Kana, welcome.
Thank you, Tony.
I want to start first, because to me it's one of the most exciting, is Kentucky, the bluegrass state, where last year Governor Bevin was elected, a kind of a Donald Trump type, anti-establishment. Nobody supported him. He ran against the establishment, but he a solid conservative, pro-family, homeschool dad, businessman, and he's been to a number of our events. Great guy. Under his leadership, something happened last night in Kentucky that has not happened in 100 years. Tell us about it.
Yes. The untold story of this election probably at this point is the rise in pro-life, pro-family Republicans at the state level. And last night, the Kentucky Senate flipped for the first time in 100 years from Democrat control to Republican control. The Democrat Speaker of the House was unseated in a surprise race. And you're right, it's quite amazing. There have been a number of significant races. Another was in Iowa. The Iowa Senate also flipped.
So we're seeing that the kind of this Republican wave that began really in 2010.
Right.
And what's significant about this, folks, is not only obviously from a policy standpoint, we've seen a record number of pro-life policies emanate from the states as a result, but we're moving once again into the census period where the legislatures will then be drawing lines again, which will be under control of Republicans. Now, I understand that many liberals are going to be convulsing right now when I say this, but what's going to happen is Republicans are expanding their majorities. They'll be redrawing the congressional lines, the legislative lines, which means essentially they can be preserving conservative leadership for yet another decade.
Yes, that's absolutely right, Tony. I think a lot of people were surprised at some of the results we saw last night at the federal level, but I will tell you that I was surprised at the state level. I was looking for a drawdown on some of those pro-life, pro-family Republican majorities in the states, and we didn't see that. As a matter of fact, if anything, we've seen those grow. We still have a couple of governor's races that have not yet been called, but we actually increased now Republican governors every cycle under Obama. We're now up to at least 33.
I mean, there's no other way to see this than a repudiation of the liberal policies of Barack Obama that were going to be continued by Hillary Clinton, as evidenced by the most liberal party platform in the history of the party, obviously juxtaposed to the most conservative Republican platform in history. And so for many voters, evangelicals in particular, those two issues were a deciding factor when they just looked at the party platforms, as we were talking earlier with Brent about. Let's talk, I just got a couple of minutes here. I want to talk about the important state of North Carolina. That's heavily invested in that race, in that governor's race. Right now, where does that stand?
Governor McCrory is running for re-election, and he is running neck and neck. The race has actually not been called. It's within a percentage point, and right now he's down. There are a number of shenanigans that went on last night in North Carolina.
Like some of the polls being left open late, which is ripe for corruption.
Right. By statute, this is going to recount.
All right, and we'll be watching that very closely. And by the way, folks, any of you that would like to volunteer and be a part of a recount effort in North Carolina, let us know, because they're looking for volunteers, because that very significant. The lieutenant governor one-handedly there. Dan Forrest, who was really kind of, along with the governor, spearheading the protection of women and children against the Human Rights Campaign and their radical gender-confused agenda. So that is yet to be seen, the outcome there.
Right.
All right, we're going to continue to track that in days ahead. Kana, thanks so much. Appreciate all your hard work at the state level.
Thanks.
Good news coming from the states. All right, we're going to take a moment and we're going to break down these numbers a little bit more in terms of what was the evangelical turnout, what motivated them, what difference did they make. And joining me now by telephone, Scott Rasmussen, president and founder of Stirk. Scott, thanks so much for joining us today.
It's great to be with you today, and the world is trying to absorb all that has happened.
I know, and you're going to help us break that down so we can digest it a little bit better by looking at the numbers you and I have been talking over the last couple of months. And the evangelical votes seem to be very decisive in this election for Donald Trump.
It did, and in fact, one of the things that really caught my attention last night was a number of the news anchors had a hard time understanding that. They would look at some of the things Donald Trump has said or done and said, how could evangelicals support this person? You and I talked about the importance of the Supreme Court. And I think what a big part of the explanation is for that strong evangelical turnout was a clear idea that Hillary Clinton would be problematic for religious liberty, for Supreme Court choices on other issues. And the importance of that outweighed any personal considerations.
You know, in many ways, the narrative that the media creates with each election cycle about evangelicals really has not changed. I mean, you go back to the early days of the moral majority and the Washington Post description of the undereducated, easily led individuals. But look, they're actually much more educated and informed and able to break down these issues and put aside personal differences that they may have with the candidate, but understanding what's at stake. As we saw in the early exit poll numbers, the Supreme Court rose to the top of the issues of concerns for evangelicals. And I guess, Scott, that's not really hard to understand when you look at what the court has done to the country over the last 45 years.
Yes. Look, the Supreme Court has been a battleground for a long time. People on the political left have been complaining that it is far too conservative, but polling has consistently shown that most Americans, or a solid plurality of Americans, think the opposite is true. And for evangelical voters, this is a huge issue. And I think, when you talk about it in terms of 45 years, I think it's important to recognize that what happened last night is certainly a significant rejection of President Obama's policies, but it's more than that. It is a rejection of about 30 or 40 years of effort to shift power to Washington, to give power to a regulatory state and unaccountable bureaucrats. And people are just fed up with it. Because of the digital revolution, because of all the information we can get now, people understand how the game is played, and they don't like it. And they want Donald Trump to break up that gang in Washington.
Well, again, when we look at the numbers where 81% of evangelicals, a larger number turning out this time than they did for Mitt Romney and John McCain, a high percentage, 81%, more than even George Bush himself gained in 2004. Right. How significant then of a voting bloc was this for Donald Trump?
In a close election, every voting bloc can claim that it's the reason their team won or lost. Obviously, without this evangelical support, Donald Trump would have finished a close second. But it combined with other groups, there's working class white voters, a strong overlap in some areas there, but these are the people who were saying, again, Washington is not listening to us. So I don't want to downplay the importance of the evangelical turnout. It was certainly critical, the high support, and I should point out too, you and I talked about this issue. Many evangelical leaders made the point about how important it was for the Supreme Court choices. People clearly understood those issues, and I think the evangelical leadership played a key role in delivering that election to Donald Trump because of the way they clarified the issues.
So let's talk, I just got a couple minutes left. Going forward for Donald Trump, how significant are the opportunities for his administration, and what is he going to have to do to be successful?
The very first thing that he's going to have to do to be successful is put together a team that can carry out a change of direction for our government. And that team is going to be we always know, personnel is policy. The second thing that he's going to have to do is he's got a majority in the Senate, a majority in the House. People who have voted for him want Obamacare to be ended. They cannot punt on that issue. Third thing that he has to do is recognize that the government cannot make us great. That a lot of what he has been elected to do is to break up this idea that all power should go to Washington. But the real positive change is going to come from a free people acting together in community, people who will take advantage of their freedoms to move the country in a different direction.
I agree with that 100%. Scott Rasmussen, thanks so much for joining us on what I know is a very, very busy day.
It's an amazing time. Thank you. Have a great day.
All right, Scott, great to talk with you again. And let me just echo what he just said is absolutely true. To think that Donald Trump is going to solve all our problems is a misnomer. What's going to have to happen is now the opportunity is there for you and I to make the changes that need to be made. And what I believe that a Donald Trump administration is going to do is going to give us the space that we need to live out our faith unhindered by the government, as we've seen in the last 8 years, the ability to share the gospel, live the gospel, see hearts and minds transformed, and through the transformation of lives, we see the transformation of communities. So if America wants to be great again, which I believe the opportunity is there, America has to be good again. And that's where you and I come in. Well, I'm going to turn now very quickly as we wrap up our time together today. I want to look at what is ahead for us from a policy standpoint? What are we going to have to do? What are the policies that are going to need to be changed? And what does Congress look like? Joining me now to talk about that, David Christensen, Vice President of Governmental Affairs here at the Family Research Council. First, let's start with the makeup of Congress. The Republicans, despite the best efforts of the left, have retained control of the Senate right now. 51 GOP seats, 47 Democrats. We got a couple of seats undecided, but it looks as though the Republicans will control the United States Senate, and they have obviously retained control of the House. Very unique situation.
Yeah, it's very unique. It hasn't happened for several years, actually. 2005, when after 2006 Nancy Pelosi took over, and we've never had the House controlled by the Senate. House and the Senate controlled by the Republicans. And so that's important because obviously legislation has to pass the Senate. Right. We know that nominations is going to be a really important issue. Obviously that's one of the key.
Now that was a challenge that George W. had when he had control of the Senate. Didn't have the 60 votes he needed, had the 50, and so it's going to be a very close Senate. How is Donald Trump going to be able to get his nominees through when he's actually facing Chuck Schumer as the minority leader in the Senate, who, if we go back to the Bush days, was on the Judiciary Committee and opposed many of President Bush's nominees for their quote-unquote deeply held personal beliefs. He was clearly anti-religious. Right. Now he's at the helm of the Democratic Party. How is Trump going to overcome it?
And he's going to have to nominate. He's going to have to stick to his campaign promise, which is to nominate conservative jurists who are going to not legislate from the bench, but are going to interpret the Constitution. Right. And the Republicans have to stick together. They have this year, as it relates to the replacement of Merrick Garland, and they're going to have to stick together. It's going to be tough to get 60 votes.
But this is where the American people come in, folks. So if you think that, you know, your responsibility ended yesterday when you went and you cast a vote for freedom and for, you know, sanity in Washington, D.C. by voting for Donald Trump and conservatives, that's just the beginning. I mean, this is going to have to be a team effort where conservatives across the country weigh in and quite frankly, pound these Democrats who are obstructionists. And there's midterm elections coming up, and I mean, this is a chance to challenge some of this.
In 2018, 25 Senate Democrats are up for re-election and only 8 Republicans. So Republicans need to hold firm. They need to work with Donald Trump in terms of the nominees. There's other legislation, obviously, that with 51 votes they can pass, and they're going to have to.
Obamacare can go away through reconciliation. We proved that last year.
Exactly.
That can be done again, so that's got to be at the top of the list.
Yeah, defunding most of Obamacare, repealing most of it, and defunding a majority of Planned Parenthood was accomplished by Congress last year. It just needs a president's signature. Now we have a president who's going to sign.
I want to quickly just point out something on the Republicans that lost their Senate seats. We've only had one Republican that was defeated.
Senator Mark Kirk, Illinois,
and he was a moderate liberal Republican.
That's
so
right.
no conservative lost their bid for re-election. In fact, all of the true blue members.
14 senators who were up for re-election who were true blue, 100% with FRC Action Scorecard. All 14.
So this really was the election of conservatives. The American people commended and rewarded conservatives for standing true to their principles. Now with someone who has embraced conservatism and is unashamed to break through the wall of political correctness, Donald Trump, I think, is going to create a new era of abiding by campaign promises.
Absolutely. I mean, you have the Supreme Court, which we talked about. We have repealing Obamacare, defunding Planned Parenthood, pro-life, protecting the Hyde Amendment, and religious freedom, the Johnson Amendment, which is something that Whip Scalise introduced legislation this past September, something that you were involved in and Donald Trump has supported. We have to see efforts to try to push that forward as well to protect the religious freedoms of people.
So you're going to have to pull off the shelf your offensive playbook and put the defensive playbook back on the shelf for a while, because there's going to be a lot of opportunities to pass pro-family, pro-life, pro-religious freedom, pro-constitutional measures here in the next Congress.
Yeah, absolutely. What's so clear is Harry Reid tried to bottle up this entire year in the Senate. We only had one vote we scored in the Senate this year. We had a number 12 votes last year. Now there's a call for Republicans to do the right thing in Congress. They can't use the fact that President Obama is in office as an excuse not to move all the pro-life legislation the House sends over.
Yeah.
Now we have to go on offense and move these things.
Well, we're going to be obviously paying very, very close attention. David,
Absolutely.
thanks so much. Great
Thank
job.
you very much. Appreciate
All right.
it. Thank you.
Well, folks, that's just a quick overview and for now, but we're going to be breaking down even further the numbers as we take a look at what drove evangelicals in record numbers to the polls. And that's going to be used as encouragement to come alongside the Trump administration and this Republican-controlled Congress to make good on those campaign promises. So a couple of action steps for you here today. Number one, click share at the bottom of this screen and make sure your friends see this program and know how they can get involved. Connect with FRC Action, so you know what's happening here in Washington, D.C. We didn't talk about it, but we have a lame duck session of Congress coming up. This is not a time to give Barack Obama anything on his way out. We've got to hold fast for these conservative principles. Number one, click on the share button. Number two, pray. First, a prayer of thanksgiving that God has given us not what we deserve, but what we've asked for. And that is a reprieve so that we might do what we are called to do, and that is to live out our faith in an authentic way so that it touches the lives of others, so that we might see their lives and ultimately our communities transformed. And then you've got to be engaged. We are going to see opportunities come before us, but we're going to have to be involved, pushing forward on these and staying informed. And again, let me just remind you as we close our time together what's at stake here. The Democratic, liberal, progressive establishment is going to be circling the wagons because that's all they have left. They were sent a resounding repudiation by the American voters yesterday. And now they're going to do everything they can to try to preserve what they have left. This is an opportunity to have conservatism, constitutional conservatism, on the march. Let's not just stop here. Let's go forward and preserve this great republic for our children and our grandchildren. Thanks so much for joining us. Election 2016, here's where we stand, right here, and I hope you'll stand with us.